Amtgard International and Amtgard Leadership University are proud to present Amtgard Rules of Play Version 8. Foreword. This rulebook made easy. Rulebooks are confusing things. They're often written by people who know what they're trying to accomplish, but written for people who have no idea of their writer's goals. Understandably, it is impossible for the writers to foresee and account for every possible situation. With this in mind, please consider the following when reading through this rulebook and when applying the rules on the field. Item 1. Amtgard requires cooperation, honor, and fair play in order to ensure the most fun for all participants. Please read these rules thoroughly. The more familiar you are with the rules, the better equipped you will be to handle situations that are not explicitly covered. Item 2. On your first few reads through this rulebook, or if you're just looking to get a quick overview of the system, you'll want to pay special attention to the Made Easy sections. They highlight the most important concepts in each section and are easily identifiable by the presence of our lovable rulebook mascot, Clippy the Phoenix. Item 3. If something is ambiguous, it is important to use common sense in adjudicating the proper ruling and course of action. Safety should always take precedence in any determination, followed by fairness, then playability, then thematic considerations. If a course of action goes against safety or fairness for the benefit of thematic elements, that course of action should not be taken. Item 4. Magic and abilities only do explicitly what they say they do and do not have additional powers beyond what is explicitly stated within the rules. Item 5. Read the rules in their entire context. Some rules may give one impression when read in a vacuum, but make sense when viewed within the larger context of the game. Item 6. Don't play in the gray areas of the rules. Gray areas and loopholes will not be considered or accepted by the Reeves. Item 7. If a term is not defined in this rulebook, the commonly accepted definition of the term should be applied. If multiple definitions exist, the one that makes the most sense in terms of safety, then fairness, then playability should be applied. When in doubt, play fair. In a free-form game like Amtgard, there are bound to be interactions and situations that come up that were not imagined or considered by the authors. If those interactions are unclear, then the player should adjudicate the situation in the most fair and equitable way possible until an official ruling can be made. Have fun with it. There are a plethora of options and possibilities in the Amtgard rules. Try something new or goofy. Creativity counts for a lot, and teamwork is always overpowered. This rulebook also contains stories and quotes that provide historical tidbits and suggestions for how our game mechanics might be explained through roleplay. These bits of flavor text are not rules and should not be used to justify rule interpretations. Table of Contents. Introduction, page 1. Amtgard, the organization, page 2. Role-playing in Amtgard, page 5. Combat rules, page 6. Armor, page 9. Weapons, page 15. Weapon types, shields, and equipment, page 16. Equipment checking, page 20. Magic items, page 21. Battle games, page 24. Classes, page 29. Magic, abilities, states, and special effects, page 47. Magic and abilities, page 53. Index, page 68. Appendix A, Award Standards, page 69. Appendix B, Rules Revision Process, page 71. Appendix C, Kingdom Boundaries and Park Sponsorship, page 72. Appendix D, Common Misconceptions, page 73. The creation of this rulebook was truly a community effort incorporating feedback and suggestions from countless Amtgarders. The committee in charge of creating the rules and incorporating feedback was comprised of Sir Brennan Viridian, Sir Corderellen Blackhand, Sir Medrin Harlequin, Sir Phocian, and Sir Roger Shrubstaff. The artwork in this book was provided by Dame Casca Arrowoy and Abara Emberclaw, while design and layout was completed by Sir Grix. Amtgard, Amtgard Rules of Play, Dorun Avatar, and Clippy the Phoenix are trademarks of Amtgard International. Any reproduction or unauthorized use of this material is prohibited without the express written consent of Amtgard International. This material may be reproduced by a licensee of Amtgard International, for distribution to its members at a cost no greater than 10% above the price for the reproduction of this material, rounded up to the next dollar. Copyright 2014, Amtgard International. www.amtgard.com. Page 1. Introduction. What is Amtgard? Amtgard is a swords and sorcery-styled medieval combat, culture, and sciences organization. Amtgard was founded in El Paso, Texas in 1983 and has since spread throughout North America and the rest of the world. With over 10,000 active members representing a diverse swath of humanity, it's safe to say there is something for everybody in Amtgard. Whether you're a teenager in high school or an established adult, you'll be able to find an inviting peer group that is excited to welcome you to the game. What can Amtgard offer me? Amtgard is an excellent way to encourage interest in medieval combat, arts, and sciences. It's also a fun and exciting way to get exercise while meeting new people. Here are some of the common activities Amtgardians engage in. Medieval team combat using safe foam replicas, leatherworking, metalworking, armor making, tournament combat using safe foam replicas, sewing, brewing and cooking, singing and performance, and woodworking. Getting started. Getting started in Amtgard is easy and fun. Here are a few simple guidelines a new player can follow to get started in the organization. Read the Combat Rules section of the Rulebook. It's only a couple of pages and shouldn't take more than 10 minutes or so. Don't worry if you find some of it confusing. It's much easier to do than it looks on paper. Read the Playing in Battle Games Made Easy section in this Rulebook. This will explain the basic concept behind team games in Amtgard. Read the Magics, Abilities, States, and Special Effects Made Easy section in this Rulebook. This will explain the basics of how the non-combat game mechanics work. Find a group near you and visit it. That's it. Nothing more complicated than that. In fact, you're encouraged to skip directly to step 4 and jump in with both feet. The best way to learn is from friendly and experienced veterans. Find a park near you at amtgard.com. Next steps. Once you've made contact with your local group, there are a few next steps to start thinking about. Don't worry about any of these too much. They're just details that help fill in your Amtgard experience. Move at your own pace and have fun with it. Step 1. Read the flavor text in this rulebook to get a feel for the backstory and culture of Amtgard. This will help you understand and fit in better with your local groups. Step 2. Pick a character name. This is what people will call you when you attend the park, so make sure you pick something you want to hear frequently and for a long time. Good examples of character names would be John of Longbridge, Samuel Ironstone, or Darius Elfsblood. Avoid cliché names, names of famous people, names of literary characters, and names of people that already exist in your local group. For example, there are already dozens named Shadow in Amtgard. Try and pick something unique for yourself. Step 3. Consider having a backstory or character history. This isn't required, but it sometimes helps to drive your interactions and experiences with other players. Step 4. Acquire or make some gear. Eventually, you are going to want your own weapons, shields, and garb, Amtgard-specific clothing. Many people at your local park will be willing to help you out making equipment, and there are numerous online vendors who sell Amtgard legal equipment if you would rather go that route. Step 5. Join in with the wider organization. Amtgard has a great online presence on our official forums at www.electricsamurai.com as well as on Facebook. These can be great resources to meet new people, learn about what is going on in the world of Amtgard, and get ideas about fighting, crafting, and anything else that might interest you. Flavor text. Era of Phoenicia, 32, 18th of winter. The geography of this plane is of particular interest to me. Its constantly changing nature is fascinating. New lands and whole kingdoms can form out of the boundary mists almost without warning. They spring out of nothing, complete with history, people, and culture. I have yet to determine if these new provinces are indeed created whole cloth or are transported from elsewhere. Journal of Macros the Traveler. Page 2. Amtgard, the organization. Amtgard is more than just a game. It's also an extensive organization spread across the globe. Over the more than 30 years since its inception, Amtgard has evolved a very stable representative government to help administer the various activities needed to keep everything running smoothly. Each group has its own culture, behavior, an individual set of rules governing how it operates, but here are some common elements. Circle of Monarchs. The Circle of Monarchs, COM, is the ruling body of Amtgard and is formed by the heads of state for each Amtgard kingdom. The circle has a number of powers and duties, including but not limited to 1. Amending the rules on odd-numbered years. This requires a 75% vote of all represented kingdoms at the meeting. 2. Adjudicating disputes between kingdoms. 3. Approving new kingdoms. And 4. Serving as the court of last resort for player grievances. Kingdoms. Kingdoms in Amtgard are large geographic regions responsible for all of the Amtgard groups, called parks, and members within their area of influence. Kingdoms have authority over their constituent parks and are responsible for helping them succeed and grow. Kingdoms typically have the following leadership positions, which are elected every 6 months. Monarch, in charge of organizing the group for the duration of their reign in office. They are the highest authority in the kingdom. Regent, assists the monarch in the organization of the arts and sciences during their reign in office by doing such things as holding workshops, cultural tournaments, and craft nights. Prime Minister, assists the monarch by making sure the kingdom financial records and attendance records are in order during their reign. Champion, assists the monarch by running fighting tournaments, organizing battle games, and checking weapons and equipment for safety during their reign. Guildmaster of Reeves. The head reeve is in charge of settling any rules disputes, making sure that all reeves are qualified and doing their job well, and advising the other elected officers on any rules issues they may have. Parks. In order to play Amtgard, one must have other people to play with. Parks are groups of people that get together on at least a bi-weekly basis to play the game and spend time with one another. All parks start as a freehold by signing a freehold contract with Amtgard International. Most freeholds will become a sponsored park by joining a kingdom, allowing them to progress in name as their size increases. Your local kingdom corporer will provide specific details about the names and privileges of increasing park sizes. Parks typically have the same leadership positions as kingdoms do and are elected on the same 6-month schedule. Not all parks need to have all positions filled at all times. Some smaller parks only need a monarch, while larger groups need a full complement of officers. Reeves. In order to ensure that the park is following the rules and that the game is being run fairly for all participants, members of the park may also choose to become members of the Reeves Guild. Reeves. In order to ensure that the park is following the rules and that the game is being run fairly for all participants, members of the park may also choose to become members of the Reeves Guild. Reeves are the judges or referees of the game and are recognized by the gold sash that they wear on the field. Reeves should have in-depth knowledge of the rules and are tested by the current Guildmaster of Reeves to become members of the guild. When a Reeve is in charge of a battle game, their word is final on disputes involving gameplay. If a player wishes to dispute a Reeve's decision, they may do so after the game with the Reeve in question or with the Guildmaster of Reeves. However, while the game is occurring, the decision may not be disputed. Arguing with a Reeve on the field may result in being penalized or even ejected from the game. Consistent arguing may result in being removed from play for an extended period. Companies and households. In addition to the park structure, groups of people either within or between different parks and/or kingdoms may choose to band together due to a common interest. There are 2 types of social organizations of this nature: companies and households. Companies are typically groups that focus on fighting or competition. Traditionally, most companies have a leader, ergo captain, a second in command, ergo lieutenant or sergeant, and heraldry of some type. Given the normal semi-competitive nature of companies, people traditionally only belong to a single company at any given time. Households are typically non-fighting groups that focus on non-competitive aspects of the game, such as arts, sciences, service, etc. Households also traditionally have a leader, ergo house lord or house lady, and heraldry. Because of the traditional non-competitive nature of households, a person may often be a member of any number of households. Page 3. Awards and Symbols. Amtgard has an extensive award system that is used to recognize and promote excellence in a wide variety of different areas such as service, fighting, arts and sciences, honor, and so forth. Please see Appendix A for a full breakdown of the shared award system that all kingdoms adhere to. Each park may choose to have additional awards as they deem necessary, with the approval of their ruling kingdom monarchy. Some of the more recognized awards are listed here below. Apprentice. Apprentices are individuals who have a formal student-mentor relationship with a Paragon. Apprentices are taught the ways of the Paragon's order and have a desire to improve their abilities within that order. Players are typically apprenticed to only a single Paragon at a time. Paragons of an order may themselves be apprenticed to a Paragon of a different order. The reserved symbol of an apprentice is a belt favor in the color of their Paragon's order, trimmed in silver. Caller. A catch-all term for members of Amtgard who do not participate in the combat portion of the game. These players are often very valuable to the organization as they provide logistics, leadership, and support to keep the rest of the game moving smoothly. Examples can include water bearers, heralds, event organizers, and serpent knights. Knights. Knights are members of Amtgard who have been recognized as exemplars in a given area as well as role models. Knighthood is a recognition of character in addition to possessing a level of skill beyond that of a master in their field. Knights are recognized by a variety of reserved symbols such as white belt, an unadorned chain, spurs, and a white or black phoenix. There are 4 orders of knighthood in Amtgard, each of which recognizes a different skill and has its own belt trim color. Sword, awarded for martial excellence. Its symbol is a white belt trimmed in silver. Serpent, awarded for excellence in the arts and sciences. Its symbol is a white belt trimmed in green. Crown, awarded for excellence in elected office. Its symbol is a white belt trimmed in gold. Flame, awarded for excellence in service. Its symbol is a white belt trimmed in red. Knighthood may only be bestowed at the kingdom level. Masters. Masterhood may be granted in recognition of outstanding skill in a given area and has a reserved symbol of a gold phoenix on a solid color background. For more information on the qualifications to be considered a master, please see Appendix A. Masterhood may only be granted at the kingdom level. Dragon. Gold phoenix on a green background. Garber. Gold phoenix on a blue background. Lion. Gold phoenix on a purple background. Owl. Gold phoenix on a brown background. Rose. Gold phoenix on a white background. Smith. Gold phoenix on a gray background. Warrior. Gold phoenix on a red background. Men-at-Arms and Pages. Men-at-Arms or pages are typically individuals who are sworn to knights, squires, or nobles. Historically, both men-at-arms and pages fulfilled a variety of responsibilities, such as servants, soldiers, or apprentices to knights or members of the nobility. In Amtgard, being a man-at-arms or page denotes a special relationship between the individual and his or her mentor, who is typically a knight, noble, or squire. Men-at-arms can generally be recognized by either a black belt with silver trim or a green belt. Pages can generally be recognized by a yellow belt. Nobles. Monarchs may award titles of nobility for service to Amtgard. The specific titles and symbols will be listed in your Kingdom Corpora. Paragon. Sometimes referred to as a class masterhood, this is an award given to a player for consistently being an excellent example of their order, class, in full class battle games. A player should look like, roleplay, and be highly effective at playing their order to be bestowed a Paragon title for that order. A Paragon should take the lead in teaching new players how to play their order, assist them with getting the necessary equipment, etc. A player may receive multiple Paragon titles, one for each order. At the discretion of the monarch, active Paragons may be consulted about new Paragons being inducted into their order. The reserved symbol of a Paragon is a sash in the color of their class with silver trim. Phoenix. The phoenix is the symbol of Amtgard and is generally only worn by knights, masters, or as a part of a kingdom or park heraldry. Squires. Squires are individuals who have been sworn to a knight. Historically, squires were arm bearers servants, or trainees of a knight. In Amtgard, however, it may be bestowed by a knight for a myriad of reasons and most often takes the form of a mentor-student relationship. Their reserve symbol is a red belt. Flavor text. Araphenetius 31, 66th of harvest. Time itself seems subject to the elastic nature of reality on the plane of Amtgard. While all inhabitants, and indeed even visitors, if my own experience is typical, can recite the same date without thinking, the actual flow of time itself seems inconsistent. At some points, many days can seem crammed into a single date, while across the arbiter's line in the next kingdom, time flows with what I perceive as normal. Everything from monarchs' reigns to a massive wars can be condensed here, with only a few years separating the present from ancient history. Journal of Macros the Traveler. Page 4. Age of Combatants. Combat in Amtgard is reserved for players of at least 14 years of age. However, a monarch may choose to assume responsibility for allowing a child under 14 to engage in combat, provided, after evaluation, the monarch determines that the following minimum requirements are met. Item 1. The child's legal guardian must agree to assume all responsibility for the safety of the child and execute an additional waiver to that effect, acknowledging the risks inherent in Amtgard combat, especially for children engaging in combat with adults, and assuming responsibility for those risks. Item 2. The child's legal guardian must be present and within sight of the child during the time combat is taking place. Item 3. The child must be of a sufficient size and health as to not pose a safety risk to themselves or others within the normal parameters of Amtgard combat. Item 4. The child must consistently follow the rules of combat and behave in an honorable manner on the field. Item 5. The child must be mentally and emotionally capable of handling the combat environment without becoming upset or agitated. Children under the age of 14 may still engage in combat with children of similar age and size, provided they do so separately from other players, have a signed waiver, and are supervised by their legal guardians. Code of Conduct. Amtgard strives to maintain a fun, friendly, welcoming environment for mature players. As such, the following behaviors are not acceptable and may lead to ban from combat or attending. Item 1. Speech that would cause a reasonable person to fear for their property or safety. Item 2. Physical violence outside of the normal bounds of combat conduct. Item 3. Sexual harassment or inappropriate sexual contact. Item 4. Theft or willful destruction of other people's property. Item 5. Repeated unwillingness to follow game rules. Item 6. Creating a hostile environment detrimental to the enjoyment of the group as a whole. The monarch, with the joint agreement of either the Prime Minister or the Guildmaster of Reeves, may ban a player from their group and subgroups for any of the reasons, including but not limited to the list above at their discretion for any amount of time they feel appropriate. Any monarch, with the joint agreement of either the Prime Minister or the Guildmaster of Reeves, may end a ban on a player at any time, with the exception that a park monarch may not overturn a ban instituted at the kingdom level. Any kingdom level ban placed by a player's kingdom of residence for items 2 or 3 is automatically extended to all kingdoms and their subgroups. It is the responsibility of the monarch enacting the ban to notify the kingdoms using the Circle of Monarchs communication tools. Any kingdom monarch, with the joint agreement of either the Prime Minister or the Guildmaster of Reeves, may exempt their kingdom from this extension by choosing to assume responsibility for the banned player and allowing the banned player to engage in Amtgard activities within their kingdom and subgroups. In doing so, that monarch is stating that they believe the following is true. Item 1. The banned player adds no additional threat to the safety of the players in this kingdom or its subgroup. Item 2. The presence of the banned player will not create a hostile or unwelcoming environment for other players attending functions of this kingdom or its subgroups related to the nature of the ban. Item 3. There is a compelling reason that having the banned player participate in the functions of this kingdom and its subgroups is beneficial to the functioning of those same groups. Flavor text on the history of the martial orders. Regardless of what you may think, or any fancy name that they may hang on themselves, there are only two orders in this cursed place: peasants and killers. Peasants are the poor bastards without the power of will to bend the fabric of Amtgard to suit their needs. They cannot weave the mists into their armor to make it invulnerable. They cannot summon lightning from the sky or raise the dead. The killers can do just about any damn thing, depending on what strikes their fancy that day. Some people get all hung up on whether that kind of a man is a warrior or a wizard, a hero or a villain. Doesn't really matter though, they're all killers. Megiddo Sel Esdraelon. Page 5. Role-playing in Amtgard. Just as with the other aspects of Amtgard, roleplay in Amtgard is limited only by the imagination. The rules of play are intended to provide a framework and opportunity that allow players to engage in roleplay to whatever level they wish to experience. Each player has a different level of interest and expectation of roleplaying. This is also true of each park and kingdom. This section provides tips to understanding the roleplay culture of Amtgard, incorporating roleplay, and getting the roleplay experience you are looking for. Role-playing in Amtgard made easy. General tips. Make sure you are having fun. If you aren't having fun, you're doing it wrong. Roleplay should contribute positively to the Amtgard experience of everyone involved. Be realistic. Interest in roleplaying differs greatly among Amtgard players. Don't try to roleplay with people who obviously are not going to join. Move on to those who want to be a part of it. Don't hide. Don't hide behind the excuse of roleplaying. There's a fair level of treatment that one should expect when roleplaying. It is inexcusable to hide the mistreatment of others behind roleplaying or use roleplaying as an opportunity to strike out at someone. Take responsibility. Don't expect anyone else to introduce roleplay into your games. If you want to roleplay, do so. Other interested players will join in, and some won't. Character development. Keep it relevant. Develop a character that supports the medieval fantasy atmosphere of Amtgard. Keep it short. Play a character you can sum up in 25 words or less. If people want to hear more, they'll ask. Better yet, introduce it through roleplay. Roleplay is about the experience, not the storytelling. Keep it humble. It's hard to explain why you are the greatest warrior in the land if you are still learning the rules. Take time to hone your skills and play the game. You will have stories to share with friends that will be better than any story you can dream up. Don't limit yourself. Ignore the class name. Think of the abilities that you want your character to have and select that class. You do not have to play Paladin to play a Holy Warrior. Warrior, Barbarian, Scout, and Healer all offer abilities that can support that. Want to be a pirate? Check out Wizard or Scout. Let your character define the class. Don't let the class define your character. Keep it simple. If you roleplay some horrifically powerful were-vamp dragon hybrid, it will send the wrong message and likely discourage interest in involving you in roleplay. Instead, find a way to tone it down and let your character story develop on its own. Remember, you are only a star in your own story. To everyone else, you're a supporting cast. Group roleplay. Teamwork is the key. Amtgard groups consist of players with a range of interests. Opportunities should be made for those interested in roleplaying and those who aren't interested. This allows everyone to enjoy their time at Amtgard. Keeping Amtgard diverse is a key to keeping it strong. Likewise, selecting someone to play a monster who is not interested in roleplaying can give false hope to the roleplayers involved and be counterproductive. Get people who are willing to roleplay to play non-player characters and monsters in quests.
Page 6. Combat Rules. Combat is at the core of the game of Amtgard and represents a significant portion of the time spent at parks each week. Hit locations. Players have 5 locations which may be wounded: left arm, left leg, right leg, and torso. Arm. From just below the outside point of the shoulder to the tip of the fingers. A hand is not wounded if struck below the wrist while holding a melee weapon or shield. Treat hits below the wrist to a hand holding a melee weapon or shield as though they had hit the weapon or shield held instead. Leg. From just below the end of the buttocks in the back, the hip socket in the front, and an imaginary line between them on the sides down to and including the foot. A foot on the ground is not wounded if struck below the ankle. Torso. Everything that isn't an arm or leg, including the groin, shoulders, and collarbones up to the vertical rise of the neck. Notes: 1. Player may not be struck in the neck or head, will not count as a hit, and is invalid. 2. Players may not block shots with their neck or head. Intentional head blocking can result in being called dead by a reeve. 3. A wounded arm may not wield equipment, cast magic, carry anything, and must be kept out of combat. A wounded arm is capable of receiving an additional wound. 4. A wounded leg must have the knee in contact with the ground. The knee of the wounded leg may be lifted from the ground briefly to enable movement so long as the unwounded leg has a knee on the ground. If the player cannot place their dead knee in contact with the ground, the player must immediately notify his or her opponent or opponents of this by stating posting in order to avoid dropping to his or her knees. While posting, the player may not voluntarily move the foot of the wounded leg, although it may be used to pivot. Posting continues until the player dies, has their leg wound healed, or is instructed otherwise by a reeve. 5. A wounded leg is capable of receiving an additional wound even if posting, except when the knee is on the ground or during the initial placement of the knee on the ground after receiving a wound. Combat contact. A broad range of contact is allowed in combat. The rules below outline what is and what is not acceptable. No action is acceptable if it is performed in an unsafe manner. The responsibility for the result of an action always rests squarely on the actor. Unsafe behavior on the field can result in a suspension from play at the discretion of the champion, monarch, or guildmaster of reeves. Allowed. The following actions are acceptable. 1. Weapon-to-weapon contact is allowed. 2. Weapon-to-body contact is allowed on valid hit locations using strike legal portions. 3. Body-to-weapon contact. Weapons may be pushed, swept, and otherwise manipulated with your body so long as the weapon is not trapped or grabbed. Pushing or sweeping a strike legal surface results in a valid hit to the location used for contact. 4. Weapon-to-shield contact is allowed. 5. Shield-to-weapon contact. Shields may be used to deflect, move, or pin an opponent's weapon. 6. Shield-to-shield contact. Shields may be used to deflect, turn, or pin an opponent's shield so long as the wielder of the struck shield is not moved. Bashing a shield is prohibited. Disallowed. The following actions are unacceptable. Some amount of incidental contact is expected in a contact sport, but repeated or egregious offenses will result in suspension. 1. Body-to-body contact is prohibited. 2. Body-to-shield contact is prohibited. 3. Active shield-to-body contact is prohibited. Passively using a shield to prevent an opponent's forward movement is acceptable and does not count as body-to-shield contact on the part of this recipient. 4. Active weapon-to-body contact using portions of a weapon other than strike legal is prohibited. Passively planting the shaft of a great weapon to block an incoming opponent is acceptable. 5. Forcing a player's weapon against them with your body or shield is prohibited. Page 7. Inflicting wounds. Wounds may be inflicted by contacting a hit location with the strike legal portion of a weapon. Shots from melee weapons fall into two broad categories. Slash. A valid slash must be percussive, contact with an audible pop, and stop on or deflect off the victim. Stab. A valid stab must strike with the tip and stop on or deflect off the victim. These requirements do not apply to projectile weapons. Any contact from the strike legal portion of a projectile weapon will cause a wound unless otherwise noted. Some contacts which partially fulfill the above criteria are listed here as examples of invalid shots. Examples of invalid shots. Grazes. Slashes that are neither percussive nor stop/deflect. Draw cuts. Stabs which fail to strike with the tip. The contacts slide against a victim instead of impacting cleanly. Pushes. These contacts are pushed into or slid against a victim after the initial motion was completely blocked and the initial motion had stopped. Deaths. Any two wounds or a wound to the torso results in a death. 1. Unless otherwise noted, a dead player may not speak to living players or interact with gameplay in any manner. 2. Unless otherwise noted in the battle game description, a dead player may choose to return to his respawn point or remain where he died, but may not otherwise move about. 3. Dead players may move to avoid mundane danger or interfering with living players. A. This does not count as moving for the purposes of magic or abilities so long as no game advantage was derived. 4. Dead players may retrieve their own equipment from the field while dead, but may not interfere with play in any way and must stay at least 10 feet from any living opposing players while doing so. 5. Dead players that move after dying may only return to the play via respawn unless otherwise noted. 6. Unless otherwise noted, dead players may not be the target of magic or abilities. Combat notes. Miscellaneous rules necessary for the smooth operation of combat. 1. Shots that only strike garb, armor, or unwielded equipment do not count as a hit unless A. Said items blocked a blow that would have struck a combatant, i.e., garb, equipment, sheathed weapons, etc., are not shields and do not count as armor. B. The shot is engulfing. Engulfing effects do trigger on garb and equipment hits. 2. If a person is wounded in an arm throwing a shot, or killed, shots they threw in motion before being struck still count as a hit, if they land within a half second of being struck. In the case of a two-handed weapon, the wielder must remove his wounded hand from the weapon within a half second for the shot to count. This should be a clear case of finishing an already thrown shot, meaning that it requires no change of direction and the last action required to finish the shot has already been started prior to being struck. If you have any questions, ask your kingdom/group level guildmaster of Reeves. A Reeves call is always final in determining if a shot is in time or late. 3. A player may hold more than one weapon in a single hand, but may not wield more than one weapon in a single hand at the same time. A player may fire multiple arrows simultaneously. 4. Unless otherwise noted in the battle game description, players may always choose to take a death. Players who take a death may not return to play except by respawning, may not activate any on-death magic and abilities such as Fight After Death, have all enchantments removed, including persistent ones, and do not benefit from any magic or abilities that prevent death, such as Undead Minion. Combat etiquette. Combat is fast-paced and highly competitive. In order to minimize misunderstandings and confusion on the field, it is important to observe the following rules. Handling equipment. 1. Never handle anyone's personal property without first having their permission. Calling your shots. 1. When you are dead, announce it immediately and clearly. A player who does not indicate their death promptly will likely be struck again. 2. Communicate early and often with your opponents. If you make a close block or feel your opponent's shot was invalid, communicate it immediately. 3. If you are unsure if your opponent's shot was good enough, it was. Only shots which are clearly invalid should be treated as such. If you have to think about it, take it. 4. If an opponent hits you with a shot you think is late, ask them if they think it was on time. If they believe it was in time or are unsure if it was in time, take the shot. 5. When dead, immediately move yourself the minimum distance necessary to avoid interfering with ongoing combat. 6. If asked, you must promptly indicate your current wounded status. Page 8. Delivering shots. 1. Do not call shots on other players unless you are reaving or the player in question asked your opinion. 2. If you have an issue with the player not taking a shot you believe connected, ask them about it politely and directly in the form of a question. If you are not satisfied with their response, then bring the issue to a reeve. 3. If an opponent takes a wound from you which you do not believe was from a valid shot, tell them not to take it. If they insist, let it go. 4. If you hit an opponent with a shot that was late, immediately let them know not to take it. 5. If you strike an opponent in the head or neck and derive a combat advantage from it, stop fighting and allow them to recover. If necessary, back up to the point of the shot and resume the fight. Safety. 1. If you become upset or angry, go take a break. Come back when you're ready to continue. 2. If you believe a weapon on the field is unsafe or being used in an unsafe manner, then immediately address it politely with the wielder. If the issue persists, then address it with the champion, reeve, or a park official. 3. If you become injured on the field, immediately inform any player engaged with you and remove yourself from the field of play. If you need assistance in removing yourself from play, notify a nearby player or a reeve. 4. If a player becomes injured in your immediate vicinity, move yourself a short distance away and continue play. If the injured player appears unable to leave the field or otherwise requires assistance, then remove yourself from play to offer assistance. Under no circumstances should a player attempt to stop the field of play because one person has become injured unless it is necessary to provide for the safety of the injured player. 5. If it is necessary to notify nearby players of a safety situation which requires them to stop play, then the player recognizing the situation should announce loudly, "Safety," to get the attention of nearby players and direct them away from the situation. If it is necessary to stop play for the entire field, a player should announce loudly, "Emergency." All players must avoid safety incidents while continuing play. All players must immediately stop play and cease moving until emergency incident has been resolved.
Flavor text. On the nature of death in the world of Amtgard. Perhaps you have merely heard rumor of immortals, and perhaps you have thought it but a myth. Let me assure you, it is no myth. Immortals walk among us. I suppose it is not for us to know why we were selected, or how many of us exist, or to what end this gift was laid upon us. You might think that such a thing would be a blessing. It is not always so. When armies bent on conquest march through your village and slaughter your families and neighbors, plunder and burn the work of your back, to see the sword come crashing down upon your head or cut upon your belly, to know that you will awaken and have nothing about you but the ashes of your failure, it is a thankless gift for sure. Megiddo, Celestialon. Page 9. Armor. Armor is period protective gear which grants an advantage to the wearer in combat by protecting them from physical blows. Armor can be based in history or fantasy, but must use approximately period materials and offer similar protection to that granted by historical armor in order to receive full value. Armor combat rules. Armor is rated by its ability to stop wounds and is referred to as armor points. Armor with an armor point value not allowed to a player class may be worn for the highest value allowed to the player class with the permission of the reeve. Any hit to armor only affects the location struck unless otherwise noted. Example, hitting the sleeve of a chainmail shirt will only affect the arm location. There are 4 possible mechanics involved with counting blows to armor. 1. A hit to armor from any weapon will remove 1 armor point from the location hit. Item 2. A hit to armor from a weapon, magic ball, etc. with the armor breaking special effect will immediately remove all armor points from the location struck if the location struck currently has 3 or less armor points. If the armor currently has 4 or more armor points, then the armor has 1 armor point removed as per normal. Example, armor with 4 points is struck by a weapon with armor breaking. The armor loses an armor point at the location struck. The armor is struck again in the same location, which now has 3 points. The armor points at that location are reduced to 0, and the wearer is unharmed unless otherwise noted. Item 3. A hit to armor from a weapon, magic ball, etc. with the armor destroying ability reduces the armor to 0 points in the location struck. The wearer is unharmed unless otherwise noted. Item 4. Contacts to armor from objects which do not fall into the above categories have no effect on the armor and pass through to the location underneath unless otherwise noted. Armor with no remaining armor points no longer interacts with hits from weapons, magic balls, etc. Armor only protects the area that it covers. Example, you have armor on the front of your leg, but a gap on your thigh, and are struck in the area left open by the gap. You are wounded and the armor itself takes no damage. Armor present on a wounded hit location will continue to function and stop blows as per normal. This does not exempt wounded arms from the requirement to be kept out of combat. Hits to armor covering a foot that strike below the ankle while that foot is on the ground have no effect on the armor and pass through to the location underneath unless otherwise noted. Armor worn under garb must be partially visible and must be announced if asked. Armor made easy. The armor rules can look intimidating at first glance, but it can be boiled down to a few simple rules that allow you to interact with the armor system in combat. Armor stops hits by losing points in the location it is hit. Once a location is out of points, the armor doesn't stop hits anymore, and the player is hit. All hits remove a single point from the armor in the location struck unless the strike is armor breaking or armor destroying. The three most common armor breaking strikes are from an arrow, a great weapon swung two-handed, or a strike from a barbarian. Armor destroying strikes are much rarer. Armor breaking strikes will reduce the armor to 0 in the location struck unless the player struck is wearing more than 3 points of armor in that location. That can only happen if they are playing warrior, paladin, or anti-paladin. If the player struck has more than 3 points of armor in the location struck, then all hits to their armor remove a single point until they are at 3 points or less, and then it behaves as stated earlier. Armor destroying strikes will reduce armor to 0 in the location struck regardless of how much armor remains. Keeping track of your own armor is simple. If you are playing any class other than warrior, paladin, or anti-paladin, then each hit removes a single point of armor unless it's one of the above types of strike, which reduces your armor to 0. If you are playing a warrior, paladin, or anti-paladin, and wearing more than 3 points of armor, then all armor breaking strikes do 1 point in the location struck until you get to 3 points, and then it behaves as above. An armor destroying strike gets rid of all of the armor, period. Determining the approximate amount of armor worn by a player is easy to do at a glance. Non-metal armors are always 3 points or less. Non-rigid metal armors are 4 points or less. Only rigid armors can reach more than 4 points. There are a few more magical effects and abilities that interact in different ways with armor, but this covers the vast majority of the situations encountered on the field of play. If you want more information, read the magic and ability sections. If you run into a situation you're not sure of, you can always ask a reeve or the player who affected you. Page 10. Armor Construction Rules. Item 1. The Monarch, Champion, and Guildmaster of Reeves rate armor. Item 2. Armor that is of mixed values across the same area will be averaged based on the percentage of each type of coverage of the area, rounding fractions to the nearest whole number. Example: an arm with a plate bracer, 5 armor points, covering 30% of the arm, and a chainmail sleeve, 3 armor points, covering 70% of the arm, will result in an armor value of 0.3 times 5 plus 0.7 times 3, which equals 3.6 or 4 armor points across the entire location. Item 3. Armor should weigh close to actual historical standards to receive full value. Item 4. Straps and other such material that hold your armor on do not count as part of the armor for either coverage or averaging purposes unless they are specifically built as such. Example: the leather strap across your back holding on your steel breastplate does not protect you from hits. Item 5. A gambeson must be at least equivalent to cloth armor. A gambeson must be worn under all armor on a hit location in order to give a bonus. Item 5. A gambeson must be at least equivalent to cloth armor. A gambeson must be worn under all armor on a hit location in order to give a bonus. A gambeson which extends past the area covered by the armor it is supporting may be either treated as garb or averaged as cloth armor at the discretion of the wearer on a per location basis. Item 6. All armor must be safe, with no protruding edges that could injure someone. Item 7. All corners on any armor that will not deform under contact must come to a point no sharper than the radius of a penny. Item 8. Armor that is made from synthetic materials such as vinyl, plastic, etc. may be used but may never be rated higher than 2 armor points. Foam cannot qualify as synthetic or any type of armor on its own. Item 9. Armor is considered to be of the type it most closely resembles. Example, leather with small plates or studs attached at 1-inch intervals is still leather armor. It is not butted plate with a negative modifier. Item 10. Armor that is initially rated at 0 points does not count as armor. Armor that has been depleted continues to be considered armor, but does not continue to stop wounds until restored. Armor types and modifiers. Armors not listed that are made from authentic materials should be rated as their closest construction analog in terms of materials and appearance. Obviously modern materials and obviously modern protective gear such as sports shin pads and hockey chest pads may never be considered as armor. Such materials and items may be used as a base for armor, but the final product must have the appearance of actual armor rather than modern protective gear. Wholly inappropriate materials such as cardboard, tinfoil, and foam may never be considered as armor. Armor listed under armor types show the minimum, maximum ranges for which a piece of armor will receive base points. Armor may also receive armor point bonuses and penalties. These modifiers may not result in a total net bonus of greater than +1 unless otherwise noted. Example, chainmail may be heavy weave, heavy gauge, riveted aluminum and would have modifiers for -1 for lighter materials, -1 for less protective materials, +1 for riveted, +1 for heavy gauge, and +1 for heavy weave for a total of 4 points. General modifiers. These modifiers may be applied to any type armor as appropriate. See the description of the specific armor types below for specific modifiers. Inferior construction. Up to 2 points can be deducted for armor that is substantially less protective or durable than standard construction techniques. Example, shoddy workmanship, larger ring diameter, lighter gauge, etc. Non-standard metal. 1 point is deducted for metal armor that is less protective or lighter than steel. Example, titanium, bronze, etc. Metal which is both less protective and lighter has 1 point deducted for each. Example, aluminum. Inferior appearance. Up to 2 points can be deducted for inferior appearance unrelated to the construction techniques used. Example, obviously unfinished armor, visible inauthentic materials, or tarnished and poorly maintained armor. This does not apply if the armor is intentionally made to look shoddy for an in-game purpose such as monster barbarian armor. Armor may receive this penalty regardless of construction quality. Superior construction. Up to 1 point may be awarded for armor that substantially exceeds the defensive properties of the standard materials or uses superior construction techniques such as fluting, heavier thickness and gauge materials, hardening, smaller ring diameter, etc. May not be awarded in combination with the same specific armor type modifier. Example, a +1 cannot be awarded twice for fluting on articulated plate. Superior appearance. Up to 1 point may be awarded for exceptional appearance unrelated to the construction techniques used. Examples include extensive and well-done tooling of leather, appealing addition of studs and or rings, etching of metal, gilding, bluing, etc. Armor receiving a modifier for inferior construction is not eligible for this bonus. Helm. Up to 1 point may be awarded to the worn torso armor for wearing a helm on the head. The helm must cover at least 50% of the area from the base of the neck upwards. The helm must be of a historical or swords and sorcery fantasy design. The helm bonus is negated if the helm is removed. Does not apply to magic armor. There are 2 types of helms, light helms and heavy helms. Light helms, ergo leather helmet, coif, etc., must meet the requirements of at least strong leather or chainmail armor. The torso armor bonus received for a light helm may not exceed the maximum value for the armor type. Heavy helms, ergo Spangenhelm, Crusader helm, must meet the requirements of plate armor and additionally be made of at least 16 gauge metal. The torso armor bonus received from a heavy helm may allow the wearer to exceed the maximum value for the armor type. Page 11. Armor types. Synthetic. Materials such as vinyl, naga hide, ABS plastic, etc. Base armor points, 1. Maximum armor points, 2. Requirements. Must be a minimum of 1/8 inch thick, must not be obviously synthetic in appearance. Armor specific modifiers. Heavy gauge, +1. Material is at least 1/4 inch thick, either as a single piece or through the permanent attachment of several layers. Cloth. This fabric armor offers minimal protection from penetration and impact. Base armor points, 1. Maximum armor points, 2. Requirements. Must be a minimum of 1/16 inch thick when fully compressed. Must not be easily mistaken as regular garb. Armor specific modifiers, none. Light leather. This animal skin or fur armor offers minimal protection from penetration and impact. Base armor points, 1. Maximum armor points, 2. Requirements. Must be a minimum of 1/16 inch thick. Armor specific modifiers. Curboli, +1. The leather has been made rigid through boiling, wax impregnation, lacquering, or similar process. Gambeson, +1. The armor is worn over a gambeson. Strong leather. This thick leather armor provides some amount of protection from impact and penetration. Base armor points, 2. Maximum armor points, 3. Requirements. Must be a minimum of 3/16 inches thick. Armor specific modifiers. Curboli, +1. The leather has been made rigid through boiling, wax impregnation, lacquering, or a similar process. Gambeson, +1. The armor is worn over a gambeson. Heavy gauge, +1. The leather is at least 1/4 inch thick, either as a single piece or through the permanent attachment of several layers. Page 12. Chainmail. This flexible armor is comprised of a tight weave of interlocked metal rings that provides good protection against penetration and some protection from impact. The standard weave for chainmail is 4-in-1 European. Weaves containing less metal qualify as inferior construction. Base armor points, 3. Maximum armor points, 4. Requirements, minimum 4-in-1 standard European weave. Minimum 1.58 mm 16 gauge diameter round steel rings. Flat rings must be at least 1.22 mm 18 gauge thick along their thinnest axis. Maximum ring inner diameter of 3/8 of an inch. Armor specific modifiers. Heavy gauge, +1. The rings are at least 1.9 mm 14 gauge in diameter. Flat rings must be at least 1.58 mm 16 gauge thick along their thinnest axis. Gambeson, +1. This armor is worn over a gambeson. Dense weave, +1. The weave is denser than the minimum. Solid rings, +1. All of the rings are permanently joined so that they may not separate. Examples are riveting, welding, or solid cast rings. Butted plates. Armor comprised of numerous steel plates butted together within sewn pockets, attached to a backing, linked by cord or chain, or by some other method. This armor is flexible with numerous seams and joints between plates. This armor will deform locally when struck rather than spreading out impact over a large area. It provides fair protection against both penetration and impact. Base armor points, 3. Maximum armor points, 4. Requirements. Plates must be at least 1.22 mm 18 gauge steel. Plates must be spaced no more than 1/8 inch apart. Plates must cover at least 90% of the exposed area of the armor. Armor specific modifiers. Heavy gauge, +1. The plates are at least 1.58 mm 16 gauge. Heavy backing, +1. The plates are attached to a backing of strong leather. Gambeson, +1. This armor is worn over a gambeson. Rigid, +1. The plates are attached to a rigid backing in such a way as to create armor which does not deform locally on impact. No gaps, +1. The plates are attached in such a fashion as to provide a continuous layer without gaps between plates. Page 13. Scale. This armor is created by overlapping many metal plates which are attached along only one edge. Individual scales are not held into rigid contact with the others, thus providing less protection from penetration and impact than other overlapping metal armors. Scale offers fair penetration and impact resistance. Base armor points, 3. Maximum armor points, 4. Requirements. Scales must be at least 1.22 mm 18 gauge steel. Scales must overlap by at least 10%. The backing must not be visible through the scales. Armor-specific modifiers. Fluted, +1. Each plate has been fluted for additional strength and rigidity. Heavy gauge, +1. Each plate is at least 1.58 mm 16 gauge. Rigid, +1. Each scale is attached to neighboring scales in such a fashion as to create a rigid shell rather than individually mobile scales. Gambeson, +1. This armor is worn over a gambeson. Lamellar. This armor is constructed from numerous plates connected to each other in an overlapping fashion by cord, chain link, or similar methods. Unlike scales, the plates of this type of armor are firmly connected to each other in such a way that they resist penetration. Lamellar armor differs from other rigid metal armors in that it is not shaped to fit the body or articulated. Mobility is instead provided by the small amount of flex and slack in the attachment between the individual plates. This armor provides good protection from both impact and penetration. Base armor points, 4. Maximum armor points, 5. 6 if both the superior overlap and heavy gauge modifiers are used. Requirements. Plates must be at least 1.22 mm 18 gauge steel. Plates must overlap by at least 10%. No backing is used for support. Plates must connect directly to each other. Armor-specific modifiers. Fluted, +1. Each plate has been fluted for additional strength and rigidity. Heavy gauge, +1. Each plate is at least 1.58 16 gauge. Superior overlap, +1. 75% of plates overlap at least 25% of their surface area. Gambeson, +1. This armor is worn over a gambeson. Page 14. Brigantine. This armor is constructed from numerous shaped and fitted overlapping metal plates solidly connected along one edge to an exterior shell of heavy cloth such as canvas, denim, or velvet in such a way that when worn all plates are held together firmly without any gaps between them and follow the general contours of the body. This armor provides good protection against both impact and penetration. Base armor points, 4. Maximum armor points, 5. 6 if both the superior overlap and large plates modifiers are used. Requirements. Plates must be at least 1.22 mm 18 gauge steel. At least 75% of plates must overlap by at least 10% of their surface area. Plates need only be attached along one edge but must be held firmly against one another when the armor is worn. Plates must be shaped and fitted so as to follow the general contours of the wearer. Armor-specific modifiers. Heavy gauge, +1. Each plate is at least 1.58 mm 16 gauge. Superior overlap, +1. 75% of plates overlap at least 25% of their surface area. Gambeson, +1. This armor is worn over a gambeson. Large plates, +1. At least 50% of the surface area of the armor is protected by individual large plates rather than numerous small plates. Each large plate must be at least 10% of the total size of the hit location. Plate. Plate armor is the pinnacle of medieval armor and offers excellent protection against both impact and penetration. Plate armor forms a solid metal shell over the protected areas that spreads impact over a large surface area to mitigate concussive force. The individual metal pieces of plate armor are shaped and fitted to articulate together and follow the contours of the body. Plate armor will not deform locally when struck, but will instead behave as a single contiguous whole. Base armor points, 5. Maximum armor points, 6. Requirements. Metal used must be at least 1.22 mm 18 gauge steel. At least 75% of the protected area must be covered by individual plates, which are large relative to the hit location protected. Plate is large, individual contiguous pieces of metal connected together to form a whole, not a large number of smaller plates. Each plate must be firmly attached to all neighboring plates by strapping or metal-on-metal articulation in such a way as to form a rigid shell when worn. Armor may still be flexible where necessary for mobility. Armor-specific modifiers. Fluted, +1. The armor has been fluted for additional strength and rigidity. Heavy gauge, +1. Metal used is at least 1.58 mm 16 gauge. Metal articulations, +1. Articulations and connections between plates are metal on metal rather than metal on leather. Gambeson, +1. This armor is worn over a gambeson. Page 15. Weapons. General note. Most non-explosive, non-chemical weapons that might have been in existence before 1650 AD are allowed. Weapon safety. A safe weapon is one that will not break bones, teeth, or regularly leave bruises when it strikes a person. Every weapon must be checked for legality by the champion or a designated reeve prior to its use on the field each day. The hallmark of weapon legality is player safety, and as such, safety will always trump technical compliance with weapon construction requirements. While a weapon may meet the technical requirements for legality, it may still be unsafe in its construction or in the manner in which it is used. Some examples of technically legal but unsafe weapons might be weapons with cores so flexible as to risk core failure or other safety issues during reasonable combat, weapons made with overly hard foam, weapons with excessive tape, or weapons with excessive mass. Use of unsafe weapons or safe weapons in an unsafe manner may result in removal from play by the champion, a reeve, or other group officials. Weapon definitions. This refers to the base of the weapon to which padding is affixed. For melee weapon cores, the best things to use are carbon and graphite rods, such as from non-metallic golf clubs, kite spar, bamboo, PVC tubing, or fiberglass. Other materials will be checked for safety on a case-by-case basis. Metal and wooden cores are not legal, although metal may be used to counterweight weapons provided it is permanently attached and not in a place that may inadvertently strike an opponent. The ends of all weapon cores must be blunted by capping them with a layer of foam and tape at a minimum. For throwing weapons, acceptable options are denim, loose rubber bands, sweatshirt material, or similar. Handle refers to the unpadded part of the weapon where it is often held. Pummel. This refers to the padded portion of a weapon at the end of the handle, not intended for striking. The end of the pommel must have at least a 2-inch cross-section perpendicular to the handle and must be padded. Crossguard. This refers to an optional piece at the juncture of the blade and handle designed to deflect blows and protect the hand from injury. Crossguards must be padded and all tips must have at least a 2-inch cross-section parallel to the handle. Double-ended. Only weapon types with this descriptor may have a striking surface at both ends. This may be either a stabbing tip or a slash edge unless otherwise restricted by the weapon type. Must still adhere to the construction requirements of the weapon type for the extra striking surface. Example, a 6-foot great weapon could have a striking surface on each end with a minimum of 18 inches of strike legal in order to slash with both ends, or could have one 18-inch slashing end and one 6-inch thrusting end. Both configurations would require each end to be 1/3 padded. Stabbing tip. This refers to the end of the weapon that is not the pommel, regardless of whether or not it is used to stab. Stabbing tips must not protrude more than 1.5 inches through a 2.5-inch ring when uncompressed, nor end in an angle less than 90 degrees and must be strike legal. You must not be able to feel core through a stabbing tip. Padded or courtesy padding. This refers to the portion of the weapon that is designed to limit injuries from incidental contact with that part of the weapon and is not intended for striking. These portions of a weapon must have at least 1/2 inch of foam over the weapon's core. A weapon is required to have courtesy padding over the entire circumference of its strike legal length. Strike legal. This refers to the portions of the weapon that are sufficiently padded to prevent injury when used to strike an opponent at full force. These portions may not break bones, teeth, or regularly leave bruises when it strikes a person and must have at least 2.5-inch cross-section from edge to edge. Strike legal surfaces must have at least 1 inch of foam over the weapon core, measured from the furthest point on the blade to the surface of the core. Stab-only weapons, other than projectiles, are still required to have 6 inches of strike legal surface extending from the end of the weapon down its length on any stabbing end for safety. Strike legal must be covered in a durable, opaque cloth. Unless otherwise noted, cloth tape is not an acceptable cover. Non-striking padded surfaces within 1/2 inch of a striking surface must still be covered with a cloth cover. Heavy padding. This refers to portions of the weapon that meet all of the requirements of strike legal, and in addition have at least a 4-inch cross-section from edge to edge instead of 2.5 inches, and at least 1 inch of foam over the weapon core. It is considered strike legal for the purposes of scoring hits. Total length refers to the distance from the bottom of the pommel, or one stabbing tip of a double-ended weapon, to the furthest point of the weapon measured from the bottom of the pommel in a straight line parallel to the core of the weapon. Example, you measure a scimitar from the bottom of the pommel to the tip of the weapon, not along the curve. Swing or slash indicates a weapon intended to be able to score a hit by swinging the weapon in such a way that the side, as opposed to the tip of the weapon, strikes an opponent. Thrust or stab indicates a weapon intended to be able to score a hit by thrusting the weapon in such a way that the tip, as opposed to the sides, of the weapon strikes an opponent. Thrust-only weapons must have at least 6 inches of strike-legal padding. Page 16. Weapon types, shields, and equipment. Projectiles. This category includes thrown weapons, axes, rocks, daggers, javelins, magic balls, and arrows. Unless otherwise noted, projectiles may not be used to parry, block, or melee, are indestructible, and affect all targets struck while in motion. Unless otherwise noted, projectiles may be carried in any number. Only projectiles may be thrown, i.e., you may not throw your sword. Unless otherwise noted, projectiles may not have rigid or granular cores such as solid rubber balls, wrapped balls of rubber bands, tennis balls, etc. Suggested acceptable materials are sweatshirt material, loose rubber bands, etc. Unless otherwise noted, any protrusions or tips on a projectile must meet the requirements for stabbing tips. Thrown weapons. Light thrown. These weapons represent throwing daggers and the like. 1. Between 2.5 inches and 6 inches in total length. 2. All parts must be strike legal. A. These weapons are exempt from a minimum foam depth for strike legal. 3. May be covered in non-abrasive cloth tape instead of cloth. A. Duct tape may not be used as a cover. 4. Will score a hit from any portion of the weapon. 5. May not be of a color and shape which may reasonably be confused with a magic ball. Heavy thrown. These weapons represent throwing axes and the like. 1. Between 9 inches and 18 inches in total length. 2. All parts must be strike legal. A. These weapons are exempt from a minimum foam depth for strike legal. 3. May be covered in non-abrasive cloth tape instead of cloth. A. Duct tape may not be used as a cover. 4. Will score a hit from any portion of the weapon. Rocks. 1. Must be at least 10 inches in each dimension. 2. All parts must be strike legal. A. These weapons are exempt from a minimum foam depth for strike legal. 3. May be covered in non-abrasive cloth tape instead of cloth. A. Duct tape may not be used as a cover. 4. Will score a hit from any portion of the weapon. 5. Hits from rocks are armor breaking and shield crushing. 6. Items that meet the criteria to be classified as a rock may not also be classified as heavy thrown. Javelins. Javelins are a hybrid throwing/melee weapon. They are considered a melee weapon when wielded, but are considered a projectile otherwise. Javelins are only available to those classes explicitly granted javelins. 1. Between 36 inches and 72 inches long. 2. Must have between 6 inches and 12 inches of strike legal. 3. Must be padded along their entire length. 4. May be thrown and used in melee, including blocking and parrying. 5. Stab only for both melee and throwing. 6. Must strike point first to score a hit. 7. Must have a rigid core. 8. Pummel is not required to meet the requirements for a stabbing tip. Magic balls. These are thrown to represent various magical attacks and are not projectile weapons, but follow the same construction requirements except as noted below. 1. Must be spherical object at least 2.5 inches in diameter. 2. Must have a streamer between 1 inch and 6 inches long. 3. All parts must be strike legal. A. These weapons are exempt from a minimum foam depth for strike legal. 4. Will score a hit from any portion of the object. Ammunition. Not explicitly granted to anybody, ammunition is a class of projectiles used in conjunction with other types of weapons. Arrows. Includes bolts and any other similar items. Note, improperly constructed or maintained arrows can pose a serious safety hazard. Before building your first arrows, take the time to study an online construction tutorial or practice with an experienced player. General. 1. May not be drawn beyond 28 inches. 2. Fletching and nocks, if present, must be in good repair. 3. Must be clearly labeled with their owner's name. A. Arrows without labels will never be allowed on the field. B. Using arrows without labels can result in immediate suspension from the field. 4. Broken or poorly mended arrows are not to be used. 5. Like any other equipment, arrows may only be used by their owner unless the owner grants specific permission for another player to use their arrows. A. The owner of an arrow is responsible for the safety of the arrow even if fired by another player. B. Special arrows may never be shared. 6. Swinging at an arrow in flight is illegal. A. Arrows may only be passively blocked by placing an object in the flight path. Shafts. 1. May be fiberglass, aluminum, plastic, or graphite. 2. Wood shafts are only allowed if covered in a minimum of 4 mils of plastic tape or equivalent. 3. Shafts must have any real arrowhead or tip removed. 4. The tip of shafts must be built up to at least 0.5 inches in diameter in a solid manner such as A. Wrapping in duct tape and capping with a penny. B. Affixing a washer into the shaft with a glued-in screw. Or C. Other similar methods. Heads. 1. Must be 2.5 inches in diameter. 2. Front and side must be strike legal. 3. Must include a minimum of 2 inches of foam in front of the shaft of the arrow. A. The 0.5 inches of foam immediately after the end of the shaft must be closed cell. B. Foam must be firm but compressible and not able to deform around the arrow shaft on impact. C. Very soft foam such as couch cushion do not count towards the required 2 inches minimum of foam. 4. Heads should be checked regularly for degrading foam. 5. Must have a cloth cover on the head. A. Properly colored strips may be used in lieu of colored head covers to denote special arrow status. B. Normal arrows may not be covered in any of the colors reserved for special arrows. C. Reserved colors are yellow, red, green, purple, and gray. 6. Must strike point first to score a hit. 7. Affects all targets struck while in motion. 8. Hits from arrows are armor breaking. 9. Hits from arrows are weapon destroying. Siege projectiles. See siege weapons for more information. Bow. Includes bows and crossbows used to fire arrows or bolts. They are not projectile weapons themselves, but are used exclusively with arrows. 1. The maximum limit for a bow's pull is 35 pounds with a maximum 28 inches draw length. 2. Crossbows are limited to no more than 450 inch-pounds. 3. No compound bows are allowed. 4. At 20 feet or less, bows must be no more than half drawn. A. Crossbows do not have to be half drawn within 20 feet. 5. If hit by a weapon, the bow is destroyed. Melee. All melee weapons require a rigid core, unless otherwise noted, and may be used to block, parry, or score hits with their strike legal portion. Some melee weapons allow for heavy padding substitution for a given length. Heavy padding substitution. All melee weapons require a portion of their length to be strike legal as noted in the individual weapon descriptions. Heavy padding substitution allows you to replace a portion of strike legal with heavy padding. For each inch of heavy padding added, you may also replace an additional inch of strike legal with courtesy padding. Heavy padding added must start within 3 inches of the stabbing tip and proceed continuously towards the handle. Courtesy padding added in this manner must begin at the top of the handle and proceed continuously towards the tip. For example, a 48-inch long weapon is typically required to have 32 inches of strike legal followed by 16 inches of handle. Using heavy padded substitution, you could have 16 inches of heavy padding followed by 16 inches of courtesy padding and then 16 inches of handle. Dagger. 1. May stab and slash. 2. Between 10 inches and 18 inches. 3. Must have 10 inches strike legal. Short. 1. May stab and slash. 2. Between 18 inches and 36 inches. 3. At least 2/3 of its length must be strike legal. 4. Allows for 1/3 of its length to be substituted for heavy padding. Long. 1. May stab and slash. 2. Over 36 inches up to a maximum of 48 inches. 3. At least 2/3 of its length must be padded. 4. If used to slash, at least 2/3 of its length must be strike legal. 5. Allows for 1/3 of its length to be substituted for heavy padding. 6. May be double-ended. Page 18. Great. 1. May stab and slash. 2. Greater than 48 inches in length. 3. Must be padded on the upper half of length or at least 3 feet, whichever is less. 4. If used to slash, must have at least 18 inches of strike legal surface. 5. If the weapon has at least 18 inches of heavy padding, it gains the shield crushing and armor breaking special effects when used in a two-handed manner. A. Heavy padding on great weapons must start within 3 inches of the tip of the weapon and be continuous down the core. B. If the weapon is double-ended, only ends with heavy padding take advantage of these abilities. 6. May be double-ended. A. Double-ended requires 1/3 of its length to be padded or at least 3 feet, whichever is less. This requirement replaces the standard requirement for padding on great weapons. Modu, a shield joined to a weapon. 1. Counts as both a shield and a weapon. 2. Only usable if a class can use both a weapon of the Modu's length and a shield. 3. Weapon destroying will affect the entirety of the Modu if it strikes any part of the weapon portion. 4. Shield crushing and shield destroying affect the entirety of the Modu if it strikes any part of the shield portion. 5. Magic and abilities that affect any part of the Modu, such as imbue shield or heat weapon, affect its entirety. 6. Weapon portion must be non-hinged and melee only. 7. Any shield with weapons affixed to it in any form is considered a Modu and must conform to these rules. 8. If built to slash. A. At least 1/3 of its length, excluding the shield portion, must be strike legal. B. At least 12 inches must be strike legal. C. The entirety of the non-strike legal portion must be courtesy padded. 9. May be double-ended. Hinged. 1. No more than 36 inches in length. 2. Has a single articulating head which must be entirely strike legal and cannot contain a rigid core. 3. The chain of a hinged weapon. A. Is not a legal striking edge. B. Must be wrapped in foam with less than 0.5 inches of the rope exposed at any point. 4. The combined rope and striking edge may not exceed 18 inches in length. 5. The top half of the non-rope and strike legal portion of the weapon must be padded. Siege weapons. Siege weapons are extremely powerful engines of destruction that, historically were used for everything from anti-personnel to tearing down walls from a great distance. Examples of this type of weapon include ballistas, catapults, onagers, and trebuchets. The abilities and limitations of siege weapons are as follows. 1. You may only have one siege weapon per 20 people on a team. 2. Siege weapons should have a historical or fantasy counterpart that they mimic in form and function. Ammunition from siege weapons must conform to the following rules and cannot have any additional powers unless specified by the game designers. A. Siege weapons that fire a single projectile will kill a player and destroy all their carried equipment if the projectile touches a player or anything they are carrying or wearing while in motion. This is stopped by the enchantment Protection from Projectiles, but cannot be stopped by Missile Block or Song of Deflection. B. Siege weapons that fire multiple projectiles simultaneously, such as Grapeshot Catapult, count as firing armor-breaking projectiles. Each strike from a separate projectile counts as an individual armor-breaking strike. Both Protection from Projectiles and Missile Block may be used against these types of siege attacks. No effect on shields. C. A siege weapon may not fire at a player within 20 feet. D. Siege ammunition must, at a minimum, conform to the standards of one of the following projectiles: light thrown, heavy thrown, rocks, or arrows. E. Siege weapons are considered normal weapons for purposes of being destroyed. 3. Siege weapons must be approved by the game reeve prior to being used. Safety is the utmost concern when determining whether a siege weapon should be allowed on the field. Page 19. Shields. Shields are used to block shots from weapons and are impervious to harm except from certain abilities and magics. All shield measurements are the exterior surface area on a flat plane. 1. Must not break or bend significantly during the course of combat. Rigid or easily breakable foam or low-density foams are inappropriate for all foam shield construction. Some acceptable materials are A. Sturdy, high-density foam. B. Plywood. C. High-impact plastics. D. Aluminum. 2. Must have an opaque, durable cover such as cloth or plastidip. 3. The rim and face of the shield must be padded by at least 1 inch of closed cell foam. A. All foam shields do not require any additional padding so long as the foam itself would be considered padding. 4. Hard edges may not be exposed on any surface which can reasonably come into contact with another player or their equipment. 5. A player may only wield one shield at a time. 6. Must be gripped in a hand in order to be considered wielded. A. A shield that is gripped in a hand may also have a support strap around the arm. B. A blow that strikes a non-wielded shield strapped to a player, such as a shield slung across the back, is considered to strike the player as if the shield had not been there. C. A small shield may be strapped to an arm instead of wielded in a hand. 7. A small shield is between 36 square inches, 6.8 inch diameter, and 3 square feet, or 23.45 inch diameter. 8. A medium shield is no larger than 5 square feet, or 30.28 inch diameter. 9. A large shield is no larger than 8 square feet, 38.3 inch diameter. 10. Shield shapes may not cause confusion on the field. A shield cannot look like armor or a weapon. 11. A shield may be tossed in a manner that keeps it relatively perpendicular to the ground. While in the air, such a shield is considered a terrain effect, though it is still vulnerable to things that would normally affect a shield, such as fireball or destruction arrow. A shield may not be tossed into another player or their wielded equipment. Other equipment. Sashes. Sashes are used to denote certain classes by their color in games where classes are used. All sashes must be at least 2 inches wide and be worn from the shoulder to opposite hip across the body. Strips. Strips are used to denote certain types of enchantments and special effects for quick on-field identification. The most common use of strips is to denote enchantments or abilities that function as enchantments. 1. Strips must have at least 6 inches of visible drape and cannot be covered by garb or equipment. 2. Strips on players must be attached in a visible location when viewing a player from the front. 3. Strips have a cohesive color coding system. A. Offensive enchantments and special effects are denoted by red strips. B. Defensive enchantments and special effects are denoted by white strips. C. Miscellaneous enchantments and special effects are denoted by yellow strips. 4. Enchantments and special effects that require enchantment strips do not function if the enchantment strips are not present. It is the responsibility of the bearer to ensure their strips are present in order for the enchantment or ability to function. 5. Traits do not require strips unless they require activation, i.e., traits that are an always-on part of a class do not require strips. Page 20. Equipment checking. Before any day of combat begins, all combat equipment brought to the field must be checked by the champion or his appointed representative. Equipment which does not pass a check may not be used on the field. Equipment should be rechecked as necessary throughout the day. Using unchecked equipment on the field is grounds for immediate suspension from combat for the day at the discretion of the champion. Issues with the performance of equipment checks may be adjudicated by the Monarch and the Guildmaster of Reeves. Checking process. This is an outline for checking equipment. This is not exhaustive, but serves as a short checklist. Weapons. 1. Opaque cloth cover in good repair. 2. Tips at least 2.5 inches in diameter. 3. Pommel at least 2 inches in diameter. 4. Strike legal is in good repair and is the minimum required length. 5. Core cannot be felt when used to slash in a reasonable manner by both an average user and the intended user. 6. Core cannot be felt when used to stab in a reasonable manner by both an average user and the intended user. 7. The weapon does not break bones or teeth or consistently leave marks or bruises when used in a reasonable manner by both an average user and the intended user. Shields. 1. Opaque, durable cover in good repair. 2. No unpadded bolts, zip ties, or other solid protrusions on the shield edge or face. 3. No solid, rigid core may be felt through either the face or the edge of the shield when struck solidly with the palm of the hand. Armor. 1. All corners of rigid armor must be penny round. 2. No spikes, thin ridges, or sharp edges which could damage equipment or players in the normal course of combat. 3. Chain armor does not have broken or separated links which could catch on equipment or players in the normal course of combat. Flavor text. Era Phoenici, 33, 41st of winter. Given the fractured nature of reality here, neighboring cultures often lack a cohesive structure for law and interaction. Instead, an independent group of arbiters provide consistency and justice when two groups come into conflict. They call these freelance judiciaries Reeves. Reeves are tested and licensed on a regular basis by their guildmasters to ensure they provide quality service that reflects well on the Reeves Guild as a whole. Essentially, Reeves makes sure everybody plays by the rules. Journal of Macros the Traveler. This concludes part 1 of the audio version of the Amtgard Rules of Play. As a reminder, Amtgard Rules of Play, Dorun Avatar, and Clippy the Phoenix are trademarks of Amtgard International. Any reproduction or unauthorized use of this material is prohibited without the express written consent of Amtgard International. This material may be reproduced by a licensee of Amtgard International for distribution to its members at a cost no greater than 10% above the price for the reproduction of this material, rounded up to the next dollar. Copyright 2014, Amtgard International. Visit www.amtgard.com for more information.